keeping the barbarians from the gate.
I got into the labor movement not because I wanted to negotiate wages. I got into the labor movement because I saw it as a vehicle to do massive social change to improve the lots of people.
Let's take these son of a out and give America back to America where we belong. Thank you very much. Thank you.
As far as I'm concerned, the Tea Party can go straight to hell. I am a real American. Fight for the rights of every man. I am a real American. Fight for what's right. Fight for your life.
Welcome into the program. Start of hour number 2. I'm Brian Sommerfield. He's Trucker Randy, and we are your defending fathers.
Hey, Brian, I reached out to J.B. Williams. He is the co-founder of the United States Patriots Union, Veteran Defenders, and also the North American Law Center. Good morning, J.B.
Good morning, Randy and Brian. How are you this morning?
Hey, great, good. J.B.
Wanted to have you on. We were down at the Michigan Republican Party State Convention Friday night in caucus, and there at the State Convention on Saturday. And there was a very professionally dressed lady passing out some flyers about your organization and also about the Balance of Powers Act. I wanted to have you on this morning to talk about that flyer and basically get into some other politics and information about what's going on here in Michigan. But you have researched this and have actually put forward this proposed bill. Why don't you tell our listening audience a little bit more about the Balance of Powers Act?
Absolutely. The act, the model bill, was actually researched and written now almost 3.5 years ago. By our organization. At the time, it was done by the Constitutional Law Division of the United States Patriots Union. And Barbara Catay, who's a 40-year law professional, a number of other law professionals, myself, and a few retired judges that we had actually vet the document before we ever released it 3.5 years ago. And it's a piece of model legislation for individual states that is drafted entirely upon the text and fundamental meaning of our U.S. Constitution, your state constitutions, and the Bill of Rights. It's essentially a 10th Amendment, 9th Amendment affirmation and reassertion piece of legislation that says, in short, that any, just as the 10th Amendment says, any rights or authorities not specifically delegated to the federal government remain the authority of the people and or the states. And as we're watching today and have been watching for some time now, but in particular the last 4 years under this current administration, as the federal government has found itself engaged in all sorts of things, from private banking to car manufacturing to the medical industry and health industry, and now involving itself all the way down to Second Amendment infringements on the right to keep and bear arms. The federal government has made a career habit out of stepping all over the Bill of Rights as though it doesn't even exist. And so it has become necessary for the people to act at the state and local level in order to protect the rights that they have under the Constitution and Bill of Rights. And the best means, in our opinion, to do that is what we have titled the Balance of Powers Act. It's a comprehensive, broad-based bill. It deals with a lot of different problems that are existing out there right now. Everything from how a state should react to federal laws or mandates which are themselves unconstitutional, to whether or not lower federal courts even have any jurisdiction on a subject between the state and federal government of constitutionality, when in fact the U.S. Constitution gives the U.S. Supreme Court alone original jurisdiction on those types of disputes. And so, we can get into instances that we have seen over the last few years where, had the Balance of Powers Act been in place in a state, the outcome of different circumstances would have been very different. An easy one is, a few years ago, Arizona, being a border state, dealing with all of the ills, financial and otherwise, that come from illegal immigration across the Mexican border, finally reached a point where they were fed up with the federal government not doing its job under its enumerated powers of providing for the common defense at our borders, negatively impacting the border states more than any other. And the state of Arizona decided to initiate a piece of legislation that gave their law enforcement agencies within the state the right to enforce existing federal immigration and naturalization laws, which the federal government was not enforcing. And as soon as they passed that bill, the federal government filed suit against the state of Arizona in a lower federal court, challenging the constitutionality of that state bill, and threw the bill out, threw the legislation out, and stopped Arizona from protecting its own borders, even though all they were trying to do was enforce existing immigration laws. Well, the fact is the Constitution gives the U.S. Supreme Court original jurisdiction on that matter. All Arizona had to do was file for dismissal under improper jurisdiction of that case in the lower federal court, and it would have had to gone straight to the U.S. Supreme Court instead of through this lower court being tossed out and then going up through the appellate process and hopefully someday getting it in front of the Supreme Court after it's had a bunch of adverse rulings in lower courts. So that's one example of, how the federal government is manipulating the legal system unconstitutionally in order to keep the states from doing things that the federal government doesn't like, even when the state is acting in a constitutional manner.
Okay, now I want to stop you right there because a couple minutes here we'll be going to our first break, but to basically look at specifically the Balance of Powers Act, what you're saying is the Ninth Amendment, where it says specifically the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people, followed by the 10th Amendment, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. And this is the basic premise, is what you're saying of you said a reminder, or more or less reinforces the 9th and 10th Amendments rights that are given to us right in our Bill of Rights?
Well, it reaffirms them. It does not give the states any rights that they don't currently have under the Bill of Rights and the U.S. Constitution, but because those documents have been misconstrued and misinterpreted by intent of federal authority to give the federal government supreme power over the states and the people, using the Supremacy Clause to do that, because the federal government is acting as a despotic, unchecked government at the moment, these things have to be reasserted and reaffirmed at the state levels through a piece of legislation. But more importantly, there has to be the establishment of a streamlined method by which a state can actually enforce those rights. And I've written many times over the years on matters of constitutionality and rights of the people in the states. And essentially, any right you cannot enforce, you don't have. And what we're being told by Republicans and Democrats both that are interested in federal power is that the Supremacy Clause trumps everything. That even when the federal government acts beyond its powers, beyond its constitutional authorities, at odds with the will of the people, at odds with constitutional protections of the people in the Bill of Rights or in the state constitutions, that the federal government is still a supreme despotic authority, and the states have no rights and no power in which to check or to enforce their rights.
Okay, we're going to take a break right here because that sets up another question, and I think want to give enough time to the next segment. So, Brian, if you could send us a break, we'll be back with J.B. Williams.
Definitely do that, and if you've got any questions for J.B., just send them to us via Facebook. We'd be more than happy to ask them along the way. We're your defending fathers.
Brian Sommerfield likes Randy's Mighty Good Pizza.
Hey, it's Brian Sommerfield, pizza connoisseur, and I will go anywhere for good pizza. Right here in our own backyard, Randy's Mighty Good Pizza is the very best pizza you could eat. They use the best ingredients, whether it's a pan pizza or round pizza, the best calzone around. If you want quality, you want the best, Randy's Mighty Good Pizza.
Randy's Mighty Good Pizza on West Conway Road, just off the Harbor Petoskey Road. Call 231-348-6900 or randysmightygood.com.
Good news, everyone. Lumber Liquidators wants to send you a free catalog of hardwood flooring options. Call 877-219-8793. See how you could buy the highest quality flooring for the lowest possible prices. Here's what some of our customers have to say.
I've installed a lot of hardwood floors, but this is the best bang for the buck.
Call in the next 10 minutes to get your free catalog.
I love Lumber Liquidators. I got quality products for less, and the online ordering was easy.
At Lumber Liquidators, we buy direct from the mills, and we pass the savings on to you. Call right now and get the floor guide and catalog absolutely free. It has hundreds of top quality flooring such as solid hardwoods, laminates, bamboos, and even Bellawood pre-finished flooring with a transferable 100-year warranty. Our catalog is full of tips, ideas, and our flooring project list to help you find the right floor for you. Call 877-219-8793 and get your free catalog. 877-219-8793. That's 877-219-8793.
Heart disease is the number one killer of men and women in America. But did you know that just 30 minutes a day of physical activity can improve your health and decrease your risk of heart disease? An easy way to work physical activity into your regular routine is to start walking. For every hour of regular, vigorous exercise, you gain 2 hours of life expectancy. So start walking for yourself and for your heart. Start walking with your family. You'll feel better. Start walking with your friends. You'll live longer. Start walking in your community. You'll lead happier and healthier lives. Start walking. Start something. Join the movement today. For more information on the American Heart Association START program, visit startwalkingnow.org. And start walking. Start something.
Hi, I'm LeVar Burton, and I'm proud to be a book person. How do I choose a book? Sometimes it's the cover, sometimes it's the title. I guess I'm pretty visual. If a book's really impressing me and the writing is really good, I will peek and see what the last paragraph is, because the endings of books should rock you. I am a book person, and if you're a book person too, read to a child and spark a lifetime of ambition. Join me at bookpeopleunite.org, because reading is fundamental. A public service announcement brought to you by Reading is Fundamental, Library of Congress, and the Ad Council.
Whether it's a serious fall, fire danger, or other type of home emergency, Life Alert is there for you. The company with its slogan, "Help, I've fallen and I can't get up," protects its members. Here are some of them.
When you have a heart attack like I did, and there's no one there, Life Alert was there for me.
Having a secure feeling through Life Alert is ideal.
My independence is possible because of it.
Now, Life Alert can also protect you in a fire emergency with a system that automatically notifies our monitoring center.
Thanks to Life Alert, you can live alone without ever being alone.
For a free Life Alert brochure, call 1-800-814-0825. That's 1-800-814-0825. Call now, 1-800-814-0825. For a free brochure, call 1-800-814-0825. 1-800-814-0825.
You've heard and seen commercials about health from a variety of approaches from all over the nation. What would you say if I told you you don't have to do business with someone from far away over some 800 number and hope for the best? You can find as good or even better quality service and products right here in northern Michigan. It's true. Check out eMineral.info to learn more about how their Northern Michigan team members have studied minerals in relationship to nutrition and are true believers in natural, healthy living. Check out emineral.info today or stop in at Hillman Health Foods at 311 North State Street in Hillman. Their hours are Tuesday and Thursday, 9 a.m. till 6, Wednesday and Friday, 9 a.m. till 2, and Saturday, 8 a.m. till noon. That's Hillman's Health Food at 311 North State Street in Hillman. And don't forget their website, emineral.info. That's emineral.info.
Welcome back to the program on this Tuesday. I'm Brian Sommerfield. He's Trucker Randy with J.B. Williams this hour. Check out his website. It's been posted on Your Defending Fathers, both Facebook and .us.
J.B., one of the questions that came up is, why do we need yet another law if we have these ingrained in our Constitution, both at the federal level and the state constitution? Why do we have to have another law?
What is your mechanism for enforcing your 10th Amendment rights at the moment?
The mechanism is that anytime Washington sends down a law or a mandate that we don't agree with, we as a state have a right to introduce a nullification bill.
Okay, well, that's been unsuccessful hundreds of times in a row in all 50 states so far. And as you are well aware, I'm sure, even places like David Barton and Wall Builders and Heritage Foundation have publicly written a number of legal opinion pieces saying that nullification is not a constitutional form of dealing with obtrusive or intrusive federal powers or abusive of powers. Nobody has been successful at passing a single nullification bill anywhere in the country after 5 years of trying so far, number one. Number two is we're being attacked, our rights are being attacked on 1,000 fronts every day, which means an individual nullification bill would have to be drafted, introduced, and passed each time on an individual issue that the federal government oversteps its constitutional boundaries. If we're being attacked on 1,000 fronts, that's going to require at least 1,000 individual nullification bills, and so far we haven't been successful at passing even one.
Well, then why is it that the Tea Party patriots and the Liberty Movement people and all the limited government constitutionalists that know the Constitution better than I always throw out, we need to nullify this bill. We need a nullification of the NDAA. We need to nullify Obamacare. Why do they keep putting that out there if it's not a legitimate legal battle, a legitimate defense?
The only answer to that is they don't know any better, period. Okay? And the bottom line is this, and I can demonstrate the point very clearly this way. When the federal government acts beyond its constitutional authority, at odds with the people and the state's rights under the Bill of Rights, that law, whether it is coming from the judicial branch, from the legislative branch, or the executive branch, is itself unconstitutional. And as such, it has no force of effect, no force of law to begin with. You don't have to nullify it. It already is void. It has no force or effect whatsoever. The problem is that the American people at this late stage, 230, 40 years into our grand experiment here, don't know what their rights are and don't know how to enforce those rights. Therein lies the problem. They don't understand that you don't have to nullify as such a bill that on its face is unconstitutional and without force to begin with.
Isn't it only unconstitutional on its face after it goes through the court process? Somebody has to challenge it in a lower court, and then it be appealed, and finally maybe someday end up in the United States Supreme Court. Isn't that how we determine whether or not these laws are unconstitutional?
Of course not. Of course not. If you go to Article 3, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution, it states clearly that the U.S. Supreme Court has original jurisdiction on any matters arising over constitutionality between a state and the federal government. Original jurisdiction means that the U.S. Supreme Court has constitutional jurisdiction over that matter first, not as before any appellate process, before any local court hearings whatsoever. Now, the reason that the founders put that there is so that when it was put there in order to try to keep the union intact by not allowing disagreements between the state and federal government to fester in lower courts and appellate processes for years before it could get to the U.S. Supreme Court, to the point where it threatened the union itself. The founders put Article 3, Section 2, original jurisdiction in the hands of the U.S. Supreme Court on matters like this so that the state did not have to go through a lengthy appellate process in order to eventually one day arrive at the U.S. Supreme Court. They can go directly to the Supreme Court. That's what original jurisdiction is.
So we could bypass all of these lower courts and immediately request that it go directly to the Supreme Court, is what you're saying?
That's not what I'm saying. That's what the Constitution says in Article 3, Section 2.
Now, on that premise, why then could we not had Obamacare, just picking that particular bill? I mean, we could go with, NDAA or any of these other bills or laws, but specifically focusing on Obamacare, we could have had that gone directly to the Supreme Court as opposed to going through all that lower court process?
That is correct.
Now, had the ruling come out the same on Obamacare, because I keep getting arguments from my state representative we've had on this show, we're in a situation here in Michigan where we've already denied setting up a health care exchange per the Affordable Care Act. We've already done that. We beat that battle. Brian and I talked about it. We blew up their phones, and they voted against it in committee not to implement a health care exchange, but they're going forward now with what's called a partnership. How can this, in this states' rights situation, how can we basically stop it at this point if it's already been to the Supreme Court and they ruled that it was constitutional?
Well, people should not confuse original jurisdiction with final authority. Original jurisdiction is assigned to the U.S. Supreme Court in Article 3, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution. No other court in the country even has any jurisdiction, according to the Constitution, on these matters, number one. Which means any court decisions in lower courts are not binding, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? But number two, people shouldn't confuse original jurisdiction with final authority. The founders were very clear throughout the Federalist Papers, throughout the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, that the final arbiter, all power is inherent in the American people, and all governmental powers are derived from the consent of the people and with the consent of the people. That means that the final arbiter of what is or isn't constitutional is not the U.S. Supreme Court. It is the people themselves. And I want to run down at this point because of this discussion.
1 minute.
I want to run down exactly what is in the Balance of Powers Act. Number one, it reclaims both 9th and 10th Amendment rights. Number two, it defines constitutional as the powers delegated and enumerated in the Constitution. It rejects unconstitutional acts of the federal government, which means when they step outside of their constitutional boundaries and at odds with the American people. It addresses abuses in the Commerce Clause, Necessary and Proper Clause, and General Welfare Clause. Anybody who's been working on these things over the last years knows exactly what we're talking about there. It addresses the issue of original jurisdiction under Article 3, Section 2, being the U.S. Supreme Court for any of these things. It also gets involved in setting up a state committee to review the constitutionality of federal acts as they enter the state, such as Obamacare. If Obamacare is deemed by the state to be beyond constitutional authority, which it is simply void at that point. It's not, you don't need to nullify it. It has no force of law to begin with.
Okay, hold on. We're going to break.
Bob Agnew in Washington. As another big blizzard marches across Kansas and Missouri, it's still not done with Oklahoma. The State Department of Transportation says whiteout conditions are slowing road clearing efforts in the western part of the state. That storm is blamed for at least 2 deaths. Secretary of State Kerry pushing for a free trade agreement between the U.S. and Europe, speaking in Berlin after talks with German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Kerry said today a free trade deal would help create jobs and growth on both sides of the Atlantic. U.S. home prices rose at a healthy pace in December. Rising sales and a smaller supply of available homes helped to push the Standard & Poor's Case-Shiller 20-City Home Price Index up by 6.8%. Egypt's main opposition coalition has announced it will boycott upcoming parliamentary elections. The elections were called last weekend by Islamist President Mohamed Morsi. More details at srnnews.com.
This is Brian Sommerfield and Trucker Randy, your defending fathers on 106.3 Patriot Voice.
Also joined this hour with J.B. Williams. You can check his website out. It's been posted on both our website and our Facebook page. J.B., thanks for being a part of the show today. Really appreciate everything that you're doing for us. We've had a lot of questions in this whole arena, and I think that it's pretty thick for a lot of us to comprehend all in one sitting, and so we've been trying to get it out there in doses and hopefully moving people in the right direction in this whole area.
Well, one of the things, Brian, that we got at the convention was this handout as we were walking out. And interesting enough, JB, is you posted Jase Bolger, the Speaker of the House in Michigan here, his letter dated February 22nd, which was the Friday our convention started, regarding this Balance of Powers Act. And ironically, my state representative, Greg McMaster, copied and pasted it into an email to me, the exact same letter from Jase Bolger, that basically seems like maybe it's going to be their talking points on this Balance of Powers Act. How did you perceive Jase Bolger's letter in response to Linda pushing him to make a decision or render an opinion on this Balance of Powers Act? How did you perceive his letter?
Well, first off, he was not asked to render an opinion. He was asked to help get it introduced in Michigan, number one. Number two, he referred the bill, after Linda gave it to him, to his legislative legal aide, Doug Maines, who then called me personally to walk him through the Balance of Powers Act, which I did on the phone. And each step of the way, he is a 4-year ago or so grad of law school. Mm-hmm. And in walking him through the Balance of Powers Act step by step and explaining to him what was there and why it was there as we walked through it on the phone, he agreed every step of the way that what we had was absolutely correct and constitutional as we went through it.
Okay.
Now Doug Maines, I would assume, I don't know this, but I would assume that at the direction of someone, probably Jase Bolger, who handed him the bill, he then turned around and wrote an opinion for Jase Bolger. Jase Bolger's not a lawyer, so he didn't write this opinion himself. He doesn't know, just like most state legislators don't know, what the Constitution says or what it means or how the 10th Amendment is intended to protect the states and the people of the states. But they went and copied and pasted into this opinion written by and signed by Jase Bolger from Wall Builders, David Barton, and from Heritage Foundation's writings opposing states' rights, opposing 10th Amendment rights. Specifically, they oppose nullification. And then they use the arguments against nullification, which from a legal standpoint are bogus, by the way. They use things like President Andrew Jackson opposed it. So what? President Bill Clinton opposed Monica Lewinsky's blue dress too. So what? Who cares?
Right.
Okay. They use bogus legal arguments like that to oppose nullification, but what they're really doing is they're using nullification specifically as a means to argue that the federal government has ultimate unchecked supremacy under the Supremacy Clause and that the states don't have any right to challenge the federal government when the government is acting beyond its authority under the 10th Amendment. And there is a legislator who's also a lawyer and chairs a committee here in Tennessee, who last week, I put out a video on it yesterday and this morning, a video of the hearing, in which he blatantly says that in his opinion, his professional legal opinion, the Supremacy Act trumps everything, including the entire Bill of Rights. In other words, you don't have any rights except those that the federal government decides that you have from time to time through their laws and mandates or court decisions. And the Bill of Rights is, in effect, moot. It doesn't exist as a matter of force or effect.
Because they keep pointing to the Supremacy Clause.
Because they keep, pointing towards the Supremacy Clause. Now, what the Supremacy Clause says, it does exist in the Constitution, but what it says is that, first and foremost, that the U.S. Constitution, which would include the Bill of Rights, is the supreme law of the land. That's number one. Number two, it says that federal laws that are made in pursuance thereof, that's the key phrase right there, are also enjoy federal supremacy. So now let's come back to made in pursuance thereof. That means that any laws that the federal government makes, which are continuous and in a line with federal powers according to the Constitution and Bill of Rights, do enjoy supremacy. Of course, the implication is anything that is not made in pursuance thereof, anything that is beyond the scope of authority of the federal government, anything that is at odds with the rights in the Bill of Rights, it does not enjoy, not only does not enjoy supremacy, it does not enjoy any force of law whatsoever.
But here, let me stop you right there.
Okay.
I'm focusing on the example of Obamacare.
Mm-hmm.
When it went through the court process, which we've learned by talking to you today, didn't even need to go through those lower courts. It should have gone straight to the Supreme Court. But it did go through that process and did end up going through the Supreme Court, on which they heard testimony for 3 days, and then they rendered an opinion, and they found that it was in fact constitutional.
Well, I would disagree with that interpretation of what the Supreme Court saw and what they heard and what they decided.
Well, that's what the common folks have heard, and this is what they said in the newspaper, and
they play word games. Okay, the bottom line here is they play word games. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
What the Supreme Court was asked was whether or not certain specific provisions of Obamacare were constitutional or not. That's what the Supreme Court was asked.
Okay, I believe it was under the Commerce Clause, Article 1, Section 8.
Uh-huh.
Is that the question they were specifically asked?
Yep, it is.
And so based on that Commerce Clause is where Roberts was the deciding vote and wrote the opinion that it was constitutional because it was a tax.
Right. Which of course, the administration behind Obamacare denied the whole time they were passing it and said it was not a tax.
Okay, but go with me on this then. So once they deemed that only that provision of it, are you saying that there's other provisions of Obamacare that this can still be challenged as whether it's constitutional?
Of course. The whole thing should have been challenged on its entirety. The right of the federal government to mandate health care should have been challenged on its entirety, not on certain provisions of the bill.
Why didn't they do that?
You know, your guess is as good as mine. Why did I forget what the actual number was, 24, 26 state attorney generals get together and file it in a local court when all of those attorney generals should know themselves that the Article 3, Section 2 gives the Supreme Court original jurisdiction on it? It shouldn't have been filed directly as a petition at the Supreme Court level. Why did they do that? And again, I want to point out that original jurisdiction does not mean final authority. Even though the Supreme Court, let's take the Obamacare, let's say that the attorney generals disagree with what the Supreme Court decided in Roberts' decision. Okay, Let's say they disagree. Well, the final authority is not a 9-member unelected, unaccountable oligarchy. That's not what our founding fathers put together here 230 some odd years ago. You know it, and I know it. and they know it too, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So the final authority is the people. The people at that point could have returned, the attorney generals could have returned to those 26 states and put a statewide referendum on the ballot and said, look, we disagree with the Supreme Court. We disagree with the federal government on this. We don't believe that the federal government has any right or any authority to engage itself in health care issues whatsoever. And so the people of our state is now going to decide by statewide referendum, and that is the final arbiter. You can go read literally hundreds of statements from founding fathers throughout the process of creating the Constitution and Bill of Rights that say exactly what I'm saying.
So ultimately, at this point where we're at, you're saying that it would take basically a vote of the people in each state as like you're saying, a referendum to override and to basically say we're not going to participate in Obamacare.
That's correct.
That would be the way to do this, Brian. Not about nullification. That's never been successful. But
I want to revisit nullification just in this regard real fast.
Okay.
If a law has no constitutional force or effect of law to begin with, do you need to nullify it?
No, it's not a legal law.
Exactly. And that's why we're saying, not because Andrew Jackson didn't like it. Who cares that Andrew Jackson didn't like it? Okay? Mm-hmm. That's not why nullification is the wrong answer. It's because if a law has no constitutional force of law to begin with, then you don't need to nullify it. You just need to identify it.
Wow. This is a major revelation to me, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
Everything.
I want to read a little section here if I can find it real quick.
Mm-hmm. Because we're about 2 minutes to a break here before we want to have a long segment with you on the last of the hour.
Actually, let's go ahead. I'm going to take a segment right now, give JB a chance to look that up, and then I'm going to have a final question before we wrap things up here at the top of the hour. I'm Brian Sommerfield. He's Trucker Randy with JB Williams this hour. We are your defending fathers.
Have you ever considered owning a franchise, but just didn't know where to start? Now you can use a free matching service to help you navigate through the thousands of franchises and find the best match for you. Get the freedom, get the independence you've always wanted by becoming a franchise owner. You could be in business for as little as $50,000. Call now to receive a free report on the franchise industry. Toll free, 888-966-GROW. 1-888-966-GROW. Would you ever consider owning a franchise that has never had a failure? What if the franchise were to be able to operate with no employees and you only had to deal with 25 customers? Such a low-maintenance franchise opportunity is available right here, right now. Feel free to call to receive more information toll-free. 1-888-966-GROW. 888-966-GROW.
Prices are for base buildings only. May not be available in some areas. Attention business owners, do you want a stimulus package that really works? Before you spend thousands of dollars more than you should on your next building project, listen to this. General Steel has a stimulus package designed to help you save as much as half the cost of conventional construction on your next building. As much as half. That's right. General Steel can save you thousands of dollars with a pre-engineered steel building designed for your business or church. How about a 50 by 100 foot building for under $30,000? So don't pay thousands more than you should without calling General Steel first and save as much as half the cost and time of conventional construction. With the projected demand for steel in Japan and China, prices may be skyrocketing.
877-927-3360. 877-927-3360. 877-927-3360.
Confessions of a Potentially Perfect Parent, brought to you by AdoptUsKids.org.
I know more about cooking dinner for a party of 12 than about packing a lunch for a 12-year-old. I know kids like things like fish sticks. Fillets, I get, but sticks? Maybe we can just compromise on mac and cheese. Can you make that with Brie?
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who would love to put up with you. Call 1-888-200-4005 or visit AdoptUsKids.org for more information. A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt Us Kids, and the Ad Council.
Health insurance is on everybody's mind right now. You either don't have it or you have it and you think it's too expensive. And you probably feel like you don't have any options. We can help. We are InSphere Insurance Solutions. We offer health insurance plans from major carriers nationwide and likely have a plan that can save you money. Whether you're self-employed, on a COBRA plan that's about to expire, or you simply don't have health insurance where you work and you need it, InSphere Insurance Solutions can help you. Our agents will help you find coverage you can afford. InSphere Insurance Solutions is an authorized agency in all 50 states, including the District of Columbia. Plans may not be available in all states.
Call now, 800-394-6717. 800-394-6717. 800-394-6717. That's 800-394-6717.
Confusion ever someone or have sudden...
Have you ever had sudden confusion, trouble speaking, or understanding someone?
It could be one of the 5 signs of stroke.
Sudden weakness or numbness of the face, arm, or leg.
Sudden trouble with vision in one or both eyes.
Suddenly having trouble walking or difficulty with balance.
Or a sudden intense headache that comes out of nowhere.
Don't wait. Call 911 immediately.
Time lost is brain lost.
Find out more at powertoendstroke.org. Brought to you by the American Heart Association, American Stroke Association, and the Ad Council.
Have you heard? Proactive is America's top acne system because it's fast and gentle, and it's all about prevention. So stay tuned for a chance to participate in a 60-day trial to prove it. Do you have troubled skin, acne? With Proactive, you can heal your acne and help prevent new breakouts. Right now, in this radio area, we're looking for just 50 people with moderate acne to demonstrate exactly how fast Proactive works. The first 50 callers who qualify can try Proactive risk-free for 60 days. And you get our dermatologist's clear skin or it's free guarantee. Plus, the trial includes our legendary refining mask and green tea moisturizer, plus free shipping. Be one of the 50 lucky people to complete this 60-day risk-free trial. You won't see this offer in stores or on TV. It's a radio exclusive. Supplies are limited and free shipping ends soon. Visit getproactive.com or call 1-800-662-3752. That's 1-800-662-3752.
Would your business survive a disaster? Nearly 2/3 of businesses aren't prepared for an emergency, and 40% of businesses that experience a disaster never recover. Make an emergency plan now before it's too late. For a free online tool that helps you develop an emergency plan to keep your business up and running should disaster strike, visit ready.gov/business. Brought to you by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the American Red Cross, and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Your Defending Fathers on this Tuesday. I'm Brian Sommerfield with Trucker Randy and J.B. Williams. Finishing
on
up
the email you sent me, J.B., about this issue, you wrote an opinion that Michigan State Speaker Jase Bolger violates states' rights and his oath of office.
That's correct.
You specifically detail it out in quite a bit of detail, many of the things that we talked about here on the show today. What is our rights as citizens of the state of Michigan? What is our responsibility to do with this information that you gave us in that letter?
First, let's talk about what Jase Bolger's responsibilities are as Speaker of the House, and this would apply to any representative, any state representative and state senator in Michigan or any other state. First and foremost, these are not federal legislators. These are state legislators. As such, their obligation is to the state and the people of the state first and foremost, but in compliance with the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights as well. Okay? And so if you go look up the Michigan State Constitution, you will see exactly what their responsibilities are, and they begin with their responsibility to protect the people of Michigan and their God-given rights. That's their first responsibility as state legislators. So when the federal government is doing things that is at odds with that, their first responsibility under their oath is to the people of the state of Michigan, not to the federal government, not to the White House, not to the Supreme Court, not to any of those things. Now, to the degree that they are doing that, it needs to also be in compliance with the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights, which everything in the Balance of Powers Act was actually drawn directly from those documents. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, and that's why I say he violates his oath to the people of Michigan. When he tells the people of Michigan what he says in that letter, and that is that federal government reigns supreme even when the government is overtly acting at odds with the Constitution and Bill of Rights and the rights of the people of Michigan, he is violating his oath to the people of Michigan the minute he says that. Understand?
Yes, sir.
Number two, he's violating states' rights. The 10th Amendment either exists and is enforceable or it doesn't. Okay? Mm-hmm. If it's not, any right that is not enforceable doesn't exist. We agree on that, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, so the trick is, how do you enforce what we believe to still be in force and effect, and that's the U.S. Bill of Rights. And I'm here to tell people, plain and simple, if the 10th Amendment doesn't exist, neither does the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, or 9th.
Mm-hmm.
If the 10th doesn't exist, which exists so that the state can protect all those other rights of the people within the state, that's why the 10th Amendment exists. Okay? If that one doesn't exist, then none of the rest of them exist either. We're at a very critical, serious moment in history right here. And we don't just have leftist Democrats like
Pelosi, Reid,
Obama. And Reid,
right,
trying to take your Bill of Rights away from you. We have people like Jase Bolger trying to tell you you don't have those rights either. And that's more offensive for me than a known enemy. You know, finding out that not only do I have an enemy down the street, but my wife is also sleeping with him and giving him information on how to defeat me and my family is far more offensive than the known enemy down the street. And that's exactly what Jase Bolger and these other legislators are doing. Now, the reason they're doing it is because the same problem that has existed in politics from the beginning of time. Greed, lust for power. Jase Bolger, I'm sure, wants to work his way up the ladder in the Republican Party and eventually become a federal legislator or hold federal office of some sort. And so he has to make his bed with the people who are trying to keep their boot on the neck of the people of Michigan and every other state by telling them that the federal government reigns supreme under the Supremacy Clause and that none of your Bill of Rights actually exist. Now, if you believe that's true, if you believe that Jase Bolger and his bevy of lawyers who were not taught about constitutional law since 1940s, but were taught instead about precedent and procedure, okay, how to create the impression of law when in fact it has no force of law at all when it comes out of a court, all right? If you believe those people, then you don't have any Bill of Rights today. Nobody does. They didn't attack. Jase Bolger didn't even directly address the Balance of Powers Act in his letter. Instead of addressing the Balance of Powers Act, which is not a nullification act, as I've explained here today, okay, he chose to attack nullification, something different than what the Balance of Powers Act is. And all he did was copy and paste information from Heritage Foundation, Wall Builders, in order to do that. And it's all legal mumbo-jumbo hogwash. It's total hogwash. The bottom line here is the 10th Amendment and the other 9 amendments exist in the Bill of Rights or they don't. They're enforceable or they don't exist. It's that simple. And so the people, not just in Michigan, and the reason I put this out wasn't to beat up Jase Bolger. I don't know Jase Bolger personally, don't care about Jase Bolger.
We do it on a daily basis, so it's okay. You can just join in with us.
The point is that these people are being taught by a small group of lawyers, David Barton and the people at Heritage Foundation, improper constitutional law. They're being taught that. They don't know any better themselves. They go ask a lawyer gives them the wrong answer, but they don't know any better, so they regurgitate it, okay? And at the end of the day, this is not an attack on the balance of powers or even on nullification itself. This is an attack on the People's Bill of Rights. That's what this attack is. So, to answer your question,
The only way these state legislators are going to do the right thing for the state
About
is if
20
they
seconds.
become more fearful of the people than they are of the federal government.
Well, that's where we're going to be able to come in and put the heat on them for it.
JB, incredible hour. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, gentlemen. It's always a pleasure.
Hey, thank you.
We'll be in touch for sure.
JB Williams, check him out on the web. He has written a lot of articles. You're going to want to see it. Stick around. We're your defending fathers.
The Patriot Voice Radio Network.